And I think one thing that has taken long past me recovering from pain that we've gotten really good at is understanding like our nervous system, each other's nervous systems, like what sets each other off, what's helpful in certain moments. Like I think there's so much that couples can do to support one another, and you don't need to know all the fancy science. Like it's just the awareness of like, what creates safety or danger for a person.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today's episode is a special one, part love story, part recovery story, and part masterclass on the healing power of nervous system safety. My guests are Tanner Murtagh and Ann Hampson, also known as the MindBody Couple. They're both therapists, co-hosts of the MindBody Couple podcast, and co-founders of two incredible ventures: Pain Psychotherapy Canada, a therapy clinic specializing in neuroplastic pain and mind-body healing, and MBody Community, an online resource hub for chronic pain recovery. Tanner and Ann bring a beautiful blend of personal experience, clinical wisdom, and deep compassion to this work. Tanner shares openly about his own journey through fibromyalgia, anxiety, and depression, and how learning about neuroplastic pain changed his life. Ann, a trauma therapist and educator, has supported both Tanner and countless clients through their healing and offers such grounded insight on how our relationships and environments shape our nervous systems. In this conversation, we talk about how they each came into this work, both professionally and personally, the impact of social safety in nervous system regulation and healing, what it's like being both life and business partners and how they navigate those dynamics with intention, why nervous system education is vital, not just for individuals, but for families, clinicians, and communities, and what they want everyone to know about self-trust, especially in the early, shaky stages of healing. This episode is honest, encouraging, and deeply human. If you're in the midst of your own mind-body healing journey or supporting someone who is, I think you'll find so much wisdom and heart here. Let's get into it. Welcome, Tanner and Ann. It's so fun to see you because we've met each other in person together before. I think we've also followed each other on social media for a fair amount of time before that.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I'm ever getting a chat with any two people together, and certainly with a couple on this podcast. So thanks so much for doing this together.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I know it's me and Ann do our podcast, and we're always talking to each other, but now we have a third person here that we're all talking together. It's great.
It's like we're hanging out.
Yeah.
So for the audience who's not getting to hang out in real time with us, but who is getting to hang out with us during this conversation, for those who aren't familiar with you yet, could you share what it is that the two of you do, and who you help with that work?
Of course. So, yeah, myself and Ann, we're both master's level registered social workers. So we provide therapy or counseling, and specifically what we kind of focus on is people with chronic pain, chronic illness, and working with them, and really using kind of like a brain nervous system approach to really support people in reducing or eliminating their symptoms. So that's kind of the main goal of our clinic. We're in Canada, so that's primarily we're working with Canadians, but that's really the main focus. And similar to you, Anna, we have a digital course, and lots of people take that and work with us that way as well. Yeah.
And we have our podcast.
Yes. That's right.
That's great. Which I've been lucky enough to be a guest on as well.
Yeah.
So folks should definitely, do you want to say the name of your podcast so folks can go check it out?
It's called the MindBody Couple Podcast.
Yeah. It's a great podcast.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend. I haven't asked you this before. How did you meet? Because it's, I mean, it's not the most common thing, I think, to see a couple who are both doing, the same or very similar work, and you run a business together, and you obviously run a life together too. How did that all happen?
Yeah, I can start with that answer. We met a long time ago. So we've been together for many years, actually, so much that we actually don't really know. We've lost count.
15?
No, more than that. Longer than that. And we actually met before we're both, before either of us were therapists or social workers, also before Tanner's experience of chronic pain. So we met before all of that happened. And then our life kind of just unfolded in a way where we both went into the same profession. Tanner started experiencing chronic pain and then healing from chronic pain. And then our clinic came later.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And initially we were both working at a youth drug and alcohol treatment center. Started working there, and we worked together and started dating when we were much younger than now.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's so interesting. It's because I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought, oh, you met through the similar interests of this work that you do. And I'd love to hear we can go more into depth into this now, because I'd love to hear how it is that you both came to this work that you both do.
Yeah. Well, maybe you start with that, because I kind of joined this work a bit later.
Yeah. So it really what took place is I developed fairly early on into me and Anne dating chronic pain, and it kind of became widespread, very debilitating over time. And like many people, the medical treatments, they just weren't providing relief, and found Sarno's work, Dr. John Sarno, and that was the initial books that I read. I read some of Dr. Howard Schuberner's stuff as well at the time, and recovered in this way. And I think it was interesting because we were both training to be therapists at the time. And maybe Anne had more awareness of this than myself, but I think I really didn't have awareness or openness that maybe emotions had anything to do with my chronic pain, even though I'm literally going to school as this is taking place. And they don't teach maybe this directly in school, but these ideas.
Well, I'll cut in there. Yeah. I didn't have much awareness of that either. So in this time that Tanner's describing, we're both in school. I saw him struggling with mental health, and I saw him struggling with chronic pain. But at the time, I didn't know they were linked for him either. And so I just knew he was struggling with both of these areas. And myself as his spouse, I was really struggling with how do I support him? I didn't really know.
That must have been really scary for both of you in different ways.
It was, yeah, because it was really confusing, and I knew his pain was a factor. I think because he was struggling with his mental health, that's where I was focused on. And so I didn't know how much actually he was in pain. And later on, I would have realized for him it was all connected. But at the time, I just knew Tanner was struggling, and I didn't really know how to support him at that time at all. And I was in schooling before him, so I was just trying to get through my master's degree as he was kind of falling apart a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think it's so similar to so many of the people we work with that are in like romantic relationships, like have a partner or have a family, because there was such a disconnect. Like to give context, I was like probably seen as quite high functioning before having pain. And then by the end of pain, like I was immobile, I wasn't working, I really wasn't able to do much of anything. Like I spent most of my time in bed, or I spent most of my time like watching TV. And there was like a real disconnect that, to be honest, it developed so gradually that now thinking back, between me and Anne, there was such a lack of connection, which makes sense because I was just shut down. Like I was lost in it. I often share, like I remember by the end of it, especially in that last year or so, things would be happening and I wouldn't even know if Anne was in the house. Like it was that kind of awareness, because I was just so lost in trying to fix my pain, trying to make it go away, doing everything I could to manage it, that all other aspects of life, just fell apart for me in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And for me, I kind of just thought he was depressed. It was not only later where I realized how much the pain was a factor. Maybe that was partly like because we weren't communicating clearly either.
Yeah.
I want to go, like in a moment, I want to go deeper into how your relationship and this pain experience intersected, and then how healing and the relationship intersected and were woven together. But there's something else I want to ask about here, because it's interesting, as you know, I've had my own chronic pain experience, and that led me into much of the same studies that you've all studied. And similar to you, Tanner, or how I'm understanding the story anyway, my chronic pain really came to a head when I was in grad school studying to become a therapist. And funny enough, I had just moved in with my partner, who's now my husband. Like I moved in with him right as I started grad school. And one of the many factors that was a big stress to me was I was in grad school, investing all this time, money, hope, dreams, all that in what I hoped would be a career when I came out of school. And then when the chronic pain came on, I was like, I'm not sure if I'll be able to work. And how will I support myself? Will I be a burden on my partner who I've just moved in with? I'm curious if that part of things was an issue in both of your experiences.
Yeah, I think I remember at points like feeling, and I think a lot of people feel this way, there's almost this self-blame cycle that starts to take place where people are critical, self-blaming, almost shaming themselves for not being able to connect with people, not being able to provide what their partner needs, not being able to provide what their kids need. Which again, as all we know, and as hopefully as the listeners know, like no one's to blame for that, right? Like no one's to blame for their pain or symptoms developing, progressing in this way. But I remember feeling that a lot at points of guilt or shame that I wasn't able to function in this way, specifically in our relationship as well. Like that I couldn't function in our relationship, that I couldn't be present. Because that's what it was. There was no connection because there was almost no space by the end. Is something I found. Like there was almost like no space. It felt like there was no space. Like I felt so wrapped up in what was going on mental health wise, what was going on pain wise, that it just became my whole world. And to be honest, I think it consumed our relationship, because I would say 80-90% of the conversations we were probably having was about my pain. And how do I fix my pain? And what's the next thing I do with my pain? And, what's going on with my mental health as a result of my pain? Like it just like consumed everything really, really quickly. So I think that's what really stuck out to me is I felt guilty because I had some awareness. Sometimes I lacked the awareness, but sometimes I had the awareness of like how all consuming this had become in our lives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, which I can still struggle with, but I really went into the like caretaker fix it mode, and a lot of other partners that I speak to can relate to going into that mode when somebody's struggling with mental health or chronic pain. And so I really went into that, and maybe I was big in those conversations of like checking in and how do I help and what do we do? And for me, I think that was a sense of also trying to figure it out and control. And I didn't realize how maybe unhelpful that was. And I still fall into that of like, oh, okay, there's struggling here. I will take charge. And so I've really had to learn how to dial that back, even though I don't always do that, even though it's hard.
I'll say something here. One thing I
have to say also I am the mother. And so naturally in our household, I like to do that, which also makes it hard, Tanner.
That's true. No, I'm not gonna say anything negative about that. What I will say is one thing I noticed in hindsight, this is kind of a funny anecdote. There's lots of benefits to both people in the relationship being therapists. One of the downfalls, and our poor kids, by the way, but one of the downfalls is that when I started to struggle, and even now, once in a while, when I'm like, having like an off day or something, the one thing is like Anne's therapy voice will come out. Like I can hear
oh my gosh,
the tone, like, and I never experienced that before the pain. Like there's like
I don't even know that's happening. It's automatic.
It's like, and I know that's her therapy voice. Like this is how you're talking to clients. This is not how you're talking to me. Like it's such a.
I don't mean for that to happen, but yeah, I guess so. I slip into that mode, which in some ways can be helpful in terms of like I think we learned how to communicate. So like when talking about healing, we really learned how to communicate with each other. But then yes, I think we've also had to learn how to like separate ourselves from chronic pain or those types of discussions as well.
Yeah.
It's also so human,
Yes.
So yeah, I know you, when we chatted a little about what we would be talking about on this episode beforehand, and you had talked about how the chronic pain healing process the relationship and the healing process were intertwined. And I'd love to hear you talk about that, how the relationship played a part in Tanner and your healing from this mind-body chronic pain experience. And then also how learning about the nervous system, which I know is a big part of how you healed, how that informed the relationship. Like, I'm sure there was feedback both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was interesting because it still took me, like, I want to be clear with people, like it took me many months to heal my pain, like fully. Like it's no longer chronic. Every once in a while, if I get stressed, I'll have it, but it did take many months. But there was a stark shift where I made a decision. And again, I'm not advising everyone to do this, but this is what I did. Like there was a choice where I was like, I am done trying to treat this physically. And it was like a stark choice. Like I remember I'd known about a mind-body approach for a while and at first was angry about it and then came to it. And I remember we were right about to get married actually when this was happening. So we were like a month out from our wedding.
Yeah.
It was actually right after my bachelor party.
It's a very low stakes time in life.
Right?
Oh yeah.
No pressure.
Not that had anything to do with my pain, right? But there was a stark choice about a month before our wedding where I was like, no, like I gotta like shift and do this fully. And there was improvements in our relationship, like very quickly, in my opinion, at least from my side of things. I think there was improvements in the sense that there was hope. And one thing that was really beneficial that I found Andu is she also got hopeful as I got hopeful. And then we were both like, it kind of built together. This feeling of hope of like, maybe there's like a solution here. Like maybe this is possible. And I think, you know, when I look back at the reasons that I heal, I think that was a big part. Like, I think this is missed sometimes. It makes sense because when you're doing individual therapy, what do you focus on a lot of the time? You focus on these like micro things, like what are these internal things that you can do? I think one thing that's missed a lot of times is, you know, as we talk about like social safety, right? Like, do you feel safe in your relationships? What are the strengths in your relationships? Do you feel safe at work? Do you feel safe in your wider community? That matters. When we know that most chronic pain symptoms are neuroplastic, and really it's a balance between danger and safety, like how you live life and all these factors in your life are going to have a huge uplifting result in the right direction if you can like foster that. And so I remember that, like, I remember that feeling of like, we're both on board with this. We're doing this. Like, this is the focus. And I think that was really, really helpful. And I know it's really unfortunate because I know not everyone has that. Like, I've worked with people where their partners aren't supportive, right?
Right.
They don't believe in this kind of approach. They think this is permanent. And that makes it way harder for any effect to be seen. So I think there was a huge benefit there that really took place. And for myself, I felt much more connected day by day as we were starting to work on this together in like a meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would have to agree with that. I think part of it is I saw him kind of dabbling in this, and I didn't really quite understand what was happening, but there was hope. I was like, okay, because I could see he was hopeful. So that was hopeful to me. And I think as Tanner started communicating with me about like what he was doing and how he was viewing his pain and even like what he was trying to do, that definitely brought connection back. Because then what also I understood, because I had realized I was really in some ways still in the dark for a long time of what's really going on, and maybe so was he. So as he was understanding this, I was starting to understand it too, and that was really helpful. Like that communication and almost learning together made a big difference, because then I started to get insight into what he's working on in terms of his healing, and two, like what was really going on with his pain that I for a long time didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're healing from chronic pain, I mean, I know from my experience with it, you're well, I'll speak from the first person. Like, I was kind of learning like, I knew the term nervous system before that, but I didn't really know what it was, how it functioned, and how it functioned for me, and like how I could interact with my own nervous system in intentional ways. I'm curious how learning about that informed the way that you communicate with each other, like just, you know, relationship behaviors. Did it feed outward into the relationship in that way?
Yeah. You want to go?
Yeah. Well, I think for myself, there was right away like a deeper connection with my body. I didn't know exactly what to do with all of these messy sensations, but at least I was aware of them. And like, I remember early on, and now, sure, like I know a lot of the science of the nervous system. I didn't really know that much back then. I knew enough to maybe get by, but there was an awareness of more how I'm doing emotionally, nervous system state within each day. Like, there was just that awareness, that ability to understand, oh yeah, like I'm feeling anxious. It's probably not the time to go work on this project for 4 hours for school, right? Like, it sounds so silly when I say it aloud, but I lacked that. Like, there was such a neck up mentality that I lived by. And I only dealt with things when they got so extreme that all of a sudden I'm like explosively angry or I'm having a panic attack. Like that was really how I lived life for a really long time, even before my pain started. And I think one thing that has taken long past me recovering from pain that we've gotten really good at is like understanding like our nervous system, what each other's nervous systems, like what sets each other off, like what's helpful in certain moments. Like I think there's so much that couples can do to support one another, and you don't need to know all the fancy science. Like it's just the awareness of like, what creates safety or danger for a person. A silly one that sets Anne off, that I know sets Anne off every time. You're ready. You're already rolling your eyes at me. Is repetitive noises.
Oh my
gosh. Like repetitive noise. So I could snap my fingers 3 times, and by the 3rd time, she is like redlined, like she's ready to go. But it sounds silly. But when you have kids, you can imagine the repetitive noises.
There's a lot of noises all the time. Yeah.
and that's a lighter example, but it's an important understanding that sometimes I might make a joke and repetitively make noises. And I've been known to do that. But when she's already stressed, I'm going to be a bit more careful about like what sounds I'm making as I'm going about the house. Right. So like there's this feedback that you start to understand that supports regulation in both of us and co-regulation together.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we've tried to do is, again, back to communication. So communicate with each other about it and then support each other about it. Because I think there's been times where we've known this stuff about each other, but we've not been supportive of each other around it. So I think trying to actively be a participant in creating that safety for each other or having that understanding is important. And so I know when maybe he's struggling with like extreme dysregulation, of like, okay, what does he need? What doesn't he need? How can I support that? And then vice versa. And so kind of understanding those nervous system states for each other and also our interactions.
I don't think it's silly. You said it's like a silly one, the repetitive noises. To me, it didn't sound silly at all. And I really related to that. Like, it took me a long time to recognize the fact that the sound of my husband does all the vacuuming in our home. And it's, I now see it as this very, I'm very grateful for it. He feels the need to vacuum a lot more than I would. And so as a benefit, our house is a lot cleaner than it would be if not for him. But it took me a long time to recognize that the sound of his vacuuming was like really triggering my nervous system in a whole matrix of ways. And, because I wasn't aware that that's what was going on, all these stories became attached to it, and it would manifest in these behaviors, and I'd be like snippy with him. And he didn't know what was going on. So that was making him feel unsafe. And being able to eventually identify that, I had a bunch of stories going on about, probably gendered stories that I was probably a bad person because I wasn't doing the vacuuming and all that kind of crap. And also it's something about just the sound of it, particularly when I wasn't expecting it. And so it would kind of startle me. It's just helpful to know that's going on so you can name it first for yourself and then communicate about it constructively so the other person doesn't feel in the dark and ambushed by your behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's all those, from the outside perspective, they can seem like such, I'm careful to say this, I don't mean it in an invalidating way to anyone listening. But from the outside perspective, these things can seem so small. Like if you're not in the body that's being dysregulated by this thing, the outside perspective, it's like, what's the big deal? I clinked my fork.
Logically,
right?
it doesn't.
Right? Like
logically, it's not a danger. It's the nervous system feels.
But that's it. Is like logic and nervous system wise, it's very different. We had a similar pattern in the sense that one thing that would start so many arguments for us, and now we're aware of, is when Anne is annoyed about something, not about me, like not direct, like she's not annoyed with me, but she's annoyed with something, right? Like whatever it might be. Like she's annoyed that she has to do the dishes. When she sounds annoyed, even though it's not anything about me, I feel it's about me. And you can see what would happen really quick is now all of a sudden we're in an argument and neither of us really understand why we're in an argument.
I feel like we still work on that one.
We still work on that one. That one's a work in progress.
My partner and I do too.
Yeah.
I bet most listeners who are in a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so important because like the more you can learn about these safety or danger signals of people in your life, doesn't even have to be a partner, right? Like it could be a family member or whoever. It gives us so much more information and it can help us all stay more regulated and feel safer as we're going.
Yeah.
And so I think really, my pain journey started us off, but that work has really continued on repetitively as we've kind of gone on.
Yeah, for sure it has. I think like as we learn about mind body healing, we keep learning and applying it to ourselves or our relationship as well.
And then on top of having a relationship, having a shared household, having kids, do you have kid or kids together?
Two kids, yeah.
Kids, right. So you're navigating all of that, got two different distinct nervous systems, navigating all of this terrain. You have also taken things further than many couples do, which is that you've decided to have a business together.
Yeah.
Your professional practices combined. So it's like, it's business, it's what, gives you meaning. It's just like all these things stacked up. How does the mind body nervous system work feed into that? And what are some of the challenges that come up around that? How do you use those tools to navigate things?
Yeah, well, and I think we started like Tanner, we were both working in different areas and Tanner started the business first.
And I think there's been, like anyone who owns their own business, there's bumpiness. There's going to be bumpiness, probably puts it lightly in lots of ways, but there was bumpiness. And I think us learning to work together and raise kids together and be in a relationship together, like it can really, there's so many boundaries being crossed in all these different areas all the time that we've had to really work on. Simple things like after our kids are in bed, as much as we can, we don't talk about work unless there's a crisis. It sounds simple, but it's such an important rule for me because I hate working at night. Like I can work long hours and be completely happy, but I really don't like working at night. I don't want to talk about work at night. Like I want like the last 2 hours of my day to have nothing to do with that. So it's just like setting boundaries with each other of what works. And also I think playing to like each other's strengths can be also quite helpful of, what we are potentially good at, what we enjoy doing, what keeps us more regulated. Like for example, I can meet with more clients in a day than Anne, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like I naturally, it doesn't bother me that much, but Anne could parent our kids much more effectively for a much longer period of time than I could. I can't I have my max of how long I can be parent in the parent role while staying regulated. So we're playing to our strengths as well. And that's just one example, but there's lots of examples as we kind of navigate our lives being so intertwined, right?
I'm so appreciative that you named this because I know this is something that comes up for me in regard to being in a relationship where my mind will go into this scorekeeper mode. And often it's not keeping score and like, why didn't you do this? It's more like, oh my gosh, again, I'll just go back to the vacuuming thing. It's like, he's doing all this vacuuming and now I feel bad about myself because I'm not doing that. But as you said, like, we're all so different. We have different strengths, different capacities for different things. I do our taxes. I don't love doing taxes, but it's something like I can handle. And that kind of thing is just like very overwhelming for my husband. He will do, like, he rigs up all the gadgets in our home. And sometimes he'll be like, here, let me teach you how this works. And I'm like, I'm feeling very overstimulated just at the mention of like how this gadget works. And I'm like starting to have a meltdown because my brain is just on overload. So it's so important what you're naming, that like there's nothing better or worse or wrong about simply having differences in that way.
Yeah, I think it's taken us a long time to kind of get there, and we're still navigating that and ironing out, because I think there was a long time where we would really would get that kind of frustrated with each other, or confused as like, he's doing this, I'm doing this, and that, like, but we've started to figure out something that works for us, I think.
Yeah. I think kind of like what you said, Anna, I think for a long time, especially when kids were new, like there was scorekeeping happening, whether we were aware of it or not, of like what's fair, what's unfair, who's doing more, who's doing less, that kind of thing.
I often was the one doing more. See, we're doing it now.
We're scorekeeping in this podcast. But there was that, and as much as we can, we like just such clear communication. I saw an interview, I think it must have been a podcast interview with Brene Brown. Most people know who Brene Brown is at this point. But she had talked about how, relationships day to day, I think she was speaking about like her relationship, that it's never 50-50. And, there's lots of reasons for that. But what she was speaking to in this sense is like, when me and Anne come home at the end of our day to take care of our kids, to get screamed at by them, to try and help manage their emotions, to try and get them to eat dinner, to make them their second dinner because they won't eat their first dinner, to do all of this. And then staff at our clinic are calling me. And like, when we both come home, it's not like we're both coming home at the same level of regulation. Now, I'll be clear, usually I'm the more dysregulated one, but
that's true.
That's true. But not always. Not always. Yeah. I have my good days.
Yeah.
But I think that she was speaking to the sense that like some of us, and it can't be scorekeeping, like some of us have more to give on a certain day than others. And there needs to be flexibility with that. And I think that's what we learned, is like we would try to set these rigid rules. If you do this, I do this. You can only work for this X hours, and then you need to help for these number of hours. But the reality is like our nervous system isn't rigid like that. Like it's flexible, it's ever changing, and we do our best. It's still not perfect by any means, but we do our best to be flexible in our life as much as we can.
Well, and I think something that's been helpful with that too is both of us understanding what we need for nervous system regulation and then supporting the other person to have that. And so I know what I need, and I try to get that within my week, and he knows what he needs. And so we try to work together on that. And that does look different, or there's that flexibility there. But yeah.
I'm curious to hear about, like, talking about what you each need, and it's different for each of you to regulate. And you've been mentioning that running your own business or starting your own business and running it's going to be bumpy at times, and there's going to be fires to put out and emergencies and all that stuff, which of course can trigger fear on a nervous system level. And, we know fear can trigger symptoms, can trigger anxiety, can trigger outbursts of difficult behavior, all of that stuff. How do you each individually, and I don't know, maybe also together, regulate? Like, what works for each of you individually? And are there things that help you to co-regulate with each other?
Yeah.
You go first.
Yeah, I think for me, and again, it's taken a while for us to navigate, and we are like really lucky that we have the ability to do this. But I've realized kind of since we've had kids over time, I cannot work full time. And we are very lucky that we're in a position where I don't have to work full time. And it's been a while of navigating what that looks like for me, because I do quite a bit of the childcare. And so because of that, I know when I have too many clients in a week, I really struggle with nervous system regulation, because then I also have the childcare as well. So it's been kind of figuring out what that is for me. And sometimes we are navigating some weeks. Sometimes we'll have lots of work to do, and we'll both feel that. And it'll be a reminder, oh, this is where Anne needs to sit. And so it's just feeling that out. I know for me also, I need my own space away from work, my husband, and my kids. And so figuring out that space for me so I can get it. And again, that doesn't happen every week, but then he's very aware, or we're both very aware of making sure I get that other times. And so, yeah.
I'd actually love to ask like how and even where you do that, because it's something I hear a lot from clients that,
Yes.
Clients that live with a partner and maybe they both work at home. I hear this a lot. Like I feel like I need my own space just in order to like breathe and regulate and replenish my energy. But either, there isn't the time or the physical space to do that, or I feel scared to ask for it. I feel scared to set a boundary. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I've had to ask first. I've had to figure out what I need. And then I've also had to like ask and say, this is what I need. I need this space. Luckily for me, I use some of that time during the day. And so with my clients, I don't always work 8 hours a day. And so when I get time where I have that space and time, usually that's my time. And so I've had to kind of ask for that time and make sure we can put it there. If I don't get it in the week, then I try to get certain time, like in the evenings or weekends. And so there definitely there had to be communication around it for sure.
Yeah. And I think there's that separation, like Anne does equine therapy at the clinic, like with horses.
Yeah. So that's a big where I go.
And so she can
I go hang out with
the field,
horses.
hang out with the horses.
Yeah.
And so there's that separation. I think the other thing that's key, which not everyone's going to love, which is totally fine, but for us, like our schedule is built in a way where me and Am wake up really early.
Yes.
Well, what we think is really early. Well, we wake up at 5, and our kids wake up at 6. So then what happens is we have this whole hour, and me and Anne are hanging out together from 5 to 6.
I don't even want to see him. He doesn't even, actually, I try to talk to him sometimes when I make him my coffee, and he like refuses to speak to me.
5 to 6.
Try not to take it personally.
But so we get that time as well before children awaken in our day. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of knowing that we do that, honoring that, and also communication about that. So I know he has that time. He knows I have my time. And then we've put that into place. Now, yeah, a lot of my space and time is during the day, and not everyone can have that. I've talked with a lot of people about communicating with your partner about getting some of that space in the evening of like, okay, I need my time for my walk, and I need to leave my house and like go out over here for a bit. Because I know for me that separation, like I need to be away from my house, or else I feel like I'm still in it. I'm either doing chores or I'm working or I'm doing something. So I need to step away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. I know a lot of people will find that validating. And Tanner, is it similar or is it different for you? It helps you regulate?
Well, horses scare me. So
it's not horses for him.
It's not horses for me. It's not horses for me. It's similar. I do have a fairly like structured morning routine of meditation. Could be yoga, could be qigong. Like it's kind of mixed, breath work, like some type of practice that I'm doing 20 or 30 minutes in the morning. So like I'm like pretty firm on that. Like it's pretty rare that I would miss that. Because I do have fairly like long days at work. And so like that's what's essential. And then I also have like time at lunch where I always take my lunch break, even though I like work long hours. Like there is a break at lunch, no matter what. I might walk with my dog. I find a lot of my regulation is usually like in isolation. It's not to say that I don't get regulation from connection or connecting with my kids, but I find that I get overwhelmed by too much stimulation. Maybe not repetitive noises, but like too many people, like conversations. Like I find that can be a little bit more overwhelming to my system. So a lot of my stuff is done in isolation, whether it's at the morning, at lunch, as I said, and then usually at the end of the night after my kids go to bed, I'll do another 20 or 30 minute somatic practice or something of that nature. So like I'm pretty like I try not to be too rigid because I love rigidity, which can also slide into negativity. But but I am fairly rigid with that routine, especially during the week, because I find that it just kind of maximizes me feeling kind of safe, connected, calm as I'm going about my day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that. So when he's doing those activities, I understand that. I understand why. I understand the big picture, even if I am annoyed in the moment because I have a screaming child over there. Like that's, we try to support each other in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think this is something that probably most people in relationships struggle with and have to go through a discovery process about how, first off, discovering what you actually need and then how to communicate it. And I know for myself, my things that regulate me are also taking alone time, either going for really long walks. That's something I do regularly and find really helpful. And also like going off, like just to hang out with my own friends. And in the beginning of my relationship, I would feel really guilty leaving, particularly if my stepdaughter were with us. I thought, well, I've got to like be here and on. And it took me and, conversations with my husband. It took a long time for me to understand that when I went off and did my own thing to like regulate and refresh myself, I wasn't taking away from our family. I was actually it was benefiting all of us because I'd come back, much more pleasant to be around. So,
yeah, well, and that's a really good point because I think I hear that a lot of like, well, I can't have time for me or I can't step out, and that guilt. And I think that's very common. I like what you're saying there of like, well, actually, this makes it better for our time together. And I think understanding that can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I had to have funny conversation with my husband recently where like he also like when we're moving between places, he does a lot more packing than I do. Like I do a really slapdash packing thing, and then he's like packing up all our food, and I'll often hover near him in case he needs any help. And and I find it stressful, and I found out he finds it stressful. He was like, please don't hover, go for your walk.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that hurts a little, but actually that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming to the final wrap-up questions, actually. Is there anything we didn't cover that is important before we go into this?
I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've got 3 wrap-up questions that I always ask all my guests. And the first of those is, if there was a soapbox message that you are passionate about spreading through the work that you do, what would that message be? Maybe it's a together message. Maybe you've each got your own message.
We're looking
first.
Yeah, you go first, Tanner.
Well, I think it's simplistic, but I think, especially if people already know, okay, pain, physical symptoms can be healed using a brain-based psychological approach. Like if people are already there, I usually give the message to people that like healing is possible, but you're going to have to really explore and experiment with things. The reason I explain that to people is often people will do one or two techniques in a certain way, and then it doesn't work, and then they're ready to give up. But the reality is it took, even as we talk about my and Anne's relationship, it took a lot of exploring and experimenting to come to a place where we both felt quite safe in the relationship. It's the same with healing. It takes a lot of exploring, even when we talk about social safety, which is a lot of what today was about. But that takes a lot of exploring. It takes a lot of exploring of like, who in your life do you want to see on a daily basis? Who do you want to talk with on the phone really frequently? Where do you want to work? What work environment works for you? Like all these questions, it's a bit wider than these micro kind of practices. Like it's healing work still. Like you're trying to adjust your life accordingly to create as much safety and regulation as possible for you. And I think that takes some exploring and some experimenting, which I know people get frustrated hearing that, but that's the reality. It takes exploring, it takes experimenting to find what works for you and to ultimately heal chronic pain, chronic illness.
I love that message. And I think it just applies to all areas of life, whether it's healing from chronic pain, whether it's developing a healthier relationship with a partner, whether it's establishing a business that really works for you and doesn't completely run you over, or absolutely anything else. It's true. I think I think most of us, myself included, are motivated by that hope that there's going to be a quick solution and we'll just, breathe a big sigh of relief and everything will be easy. But it just takes a lot of experimenting, and that can be a relief too. Like it's human. If you're having to spend a lot of time exploring, it's human, and we all go through that.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think for me, I guess kind of to the people that are listening, if you're in a relationship and you have a partner that doesn't have chronic pain and symptoms, communication and teaching about maybe the symptoms and the pain and MindBody approach is super crucial. And so finding that safety and connection and working together in a relationship, there's got to be communication, especially as somebody like for me, I had to learn about the MindBody approach from Tanner. I also had to learn about his pain, and I needed that through communication with him, and still communication.
Yeah. I think that's useful really for any couple, whether one of the folks has chronic pain or any kind of human pain, which is really universal. For the folks who are listening to our conversation and it's sparking ideas and sparking hope for their own healing, whether it's the healing of their relationship, the healing of their chronic pain symptoms, or all the above, but they're also feeling overwhelmed and not knowing like where to start, how to even enter this process. What words of encouragement do you have for those folks?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes down to starting this approach and starting to work at this, and I think even being open to approaching this psychologically, it can feel very overwhelming to someone, or anyone with nervous system dysregulation. Like starting to work on this stuff can feel very overwhelming. And I think we really need to break it down into really small steps. And I think that's how we need to view this. I had to be really cautious when I was working on regulation or working on reducing pain. Like it's so easy for us to think of like the end goal, which don't get me wrong, we want to have our goal in mind. But I think people can get so locked in and get so overwhelmed and dysregulated from constantly looking far ahead. But we sometimes need to break down into these really small steps, like what can I do today to create a little bit more compassion, or to create a little bit more safety, or to create a little bit more regulation, or to approach emotions more, or just be more connected to my body. Like whatever the little goal is, it's like we need to almost break it down in these really small steps. I often call them like little healing wins. Like what are the little low-hanging fruit healing wins that you're going for today? Because that's what we're trying to stack up. I think that's where people get so overwhelmed by like thinking months or a year ahead that it is going to feel really overwhelming if like that's what we're always having on our minds. So we almost need to really break it down and slow things down, right? Into these really small steps. It sounds simplistic, but the problem is when we get dysregulated, myself included, we get so all or nothing. We get so black or white in our thinking. And so like we're like fixated on the goal. And one moment we might think, this is going to happen for sure. And like moments later, we're like, we're going to completely fail at this. So like if we break it down into these really little small steps that we apply each day, it can really slow things down and help someone feel much less overwhelmed as they're starting this journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tanner said that really well. I would echo that for sure.
I also agree. And then I love the way you said it. And, something that is just occurring to me as I was listening to you is, when I first started this podcast, it was a podcast purely devoted to chronic pain recovery because that's what my work was purely devoted to at the time. And I've since broadened my work from there using the nervous system tools for the kind of like what's next parts of life. And I've broadened the podcast. So I've had guests on who are talking about, a broader range of topics. But what's interesting is that the answer to this particular wrap-up question tends to be some version of what you just said. And I feel like, this is something our nervous system really craves. It's like it craves a lot of information and like wants to know answers. And so it's like, the conversation usually starts off with an introduction and then it widens out to just like all this like breadth of stuff that could excite you, ignite you, like give you ideas. And then you feel really overwhelmed and you just really need to hear someone say what you just said, which is like one step at a let's now slow it back down just one step at a time. Finally, where can folks find you? Where can they learn more about your work? Who can work with you? What can folks reach out to you for? Please let us know.
Want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. So we actually have, I don't think we mentioned this. We actually have two companies. So we're managing two companies, but we have the one therapy practice in Canada, Pain Psychotherapy Canada. With that, it is just therapy. It's not a coaching practice. So it's just therapy. So we're only able to work with clients located in certain provinces in Canada. And we have a whole therapy team. There's about, I think, 10 of us that are able to work with people in Canada. And I'll provide you all these links, Anna, for people. But the second company is available for people worldwide. It is like our digital course that we put out recently, just last year. And it's a little intensive. You can take it in small steps, people, but we made a really big course. So it has, I think, like over 10 hours of education. It has 60 plus meditations and regulation skills and all sorts of practices that are audio or video. There's live Q&A sessions with myself, with Anne. There's another therapist that runs that with us named Alex Klassen. So yeah, we really laid out like a really detailed model for people to kind of utilize like a self-paced kind of thing.
Right. What's the course called and where can folks find that?
So the company that runs the course is called MBody Community.
Maybe spell that.
Oh yeah, it's M and then MBody Community. Play on words, but yeah, like that course is like within that company. And then we have a lot of free resources too. Like we said, the podcast, the Mind Body Couple. I also have our YouTube channel that I put a lot of free practices on, free education for people to kind of get started on their own. And then we're also on Instagram as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And yes, please send me those links so I can put them all in the show notes so listeners can find them easily, and I'll put them there. Thank you, Anne and Tanner. Thank you so much for being here and doing this together. It's so fun. It's a whole different experience getting to hang out with like the two of you together and see your dynamic and interact. It's really fun. And
thank you for having us and inviting us on to this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing, and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.